Endgame level home theater content is pretty popular here on YouTube. Almost any home theater channel or content creator has talked about endgame level home theaters, myself included. However, most home theater channels that talk about endgame home theaters are going to talk about it through the lens of like the most modern, most up-to-date equipment and specs that you can get in your home theater. So that includes projectors that are the top of the line JVC or Epson or Sony models. It talks about having media streaming through like a Zedu or a Kaleidoscape or a Plex server. It talks about JTR and Arundel speakers, and it talks about the most advanced Trinoff and Storm audio processors and things like that. Where I differ from most of those channels is that I am not looking to build an endgame home theater that is up to the modern spec of home theater equipment, such as Dolby Atmos and 4K and everything I just listed. But instead, for me, my current endgame level home theater setup that I'm trying to achieve here in my home theater is an endgame level home theater, but it's from the early 2010s. And so here today, I'm going to walk you through why I think like that and why that is the endgame level home theater I'm trying to achieve currently in this home theater setup, but then to also tell you what equipment I have here in my home theater that is up to that endgame level status for me, and maybe a few things that I want to pick up in the future. So this is kind of like a roadmap for me for my 2010s era home theater setup that I'm trying to reach here. So why don't we talk about that here in this video today? Now, if you made it through my intro and didn't end up clicking off the video, I hope you really stay for the duration, because this is an interesting topic that I want to explore and that I really feel passionate about, and that is why I want to have an endgame home theater, but I want to have an endgame home theater for like an early 2010s era of home theater equipment. And to start off with, let me explain a little bit about why that is the era I'm trying to replicate and really trying to spec out here in my home theater. And now this is obviously my opinion. This is not everyone's opinion. So some people may agree with me, some people may not. That's perfectly fine. I have no issues with anyone who's trying to spec out an endgame home theater with all modern equipment and modern kind of specs and setups in mind. But for me, I really am looking to spec out an endgame level home theater for the early 2010s era. And the main reason for that is because I feel like that is a nice sweet spot where the technology is still easy enough to integrate into a modern home theater, and the audio formats and video formats are not completely obsolete to where you're running into legacy issues of trying to integrate all that gear into your home theater. But it's also old enough that a lot of people have moved on and decided to like upgrade into more modern technologies and formats and things like that. The high level flagship equipment, especially of that era, can be found on the secondhand market for a really good discount, for pennies on the dollar to what the equipment was when it first came out, like 15, 20 years ago at this point. So to me, this is just a good sweet spot of where you have high quality equipment that can be found for relative bargains on the secondhand market. But the quality is still really good and the integration is still pretty easy, and you're not running into legacy issues. And going along with that, definitely leave a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on that era of home theater equipment and really what you think is an endgame level home theater setup for you out there, you know, here today in 2025 and beyond. I know my opinions may not really be shared amongst a lot of people, but I do think it's interesting to hear from everybody and just see how everyone has differing thoughts about this. So moving on from why I wanted to do this, let me talk about the equipment I already own and kind of the roadmap that I want to take to spec out this space here as an endgame level home theater for that early to mid 2010s era. The first things I want to talk about are the biggest items on that list, and I'm using that term in a literal sense because these are the biggest, heaviest items that I have here in my home theater, and those are my two Endgame level projectors, my Sim2 Mico 50 and my Sim2 HT 5000. And while both of them have some similarities and they also have some differences between them, both of them, in my opinion, are Endgame level DLP projectors for that 2010 to 2013 to 2015 era that I'm trying to replicate here in my home theater. And honestly, I have no kind of thoughts of upgrading past either of them at this point in time. To me, as long as they stay functional, that I don't run into any like major operational issues with them, those two projectors are going to be with me for the conceivable future. I have no real interest in moving past them. So those are the first things I want to mention that I already have here in my home theater that are Endgame level for this early 2010s Endgame theater I want to build. Sticking with the video side of things, I also want to talk about one of my main media players that I have here in my home theater, and that is my Blu-ray player. That is my Cambridge Audio 752BD. And this player is basically a rebranded, rebadged version of an Oppo BDP, I believe it's like 93 Blu-ray player, if I remember correctly. I'll throw it in down here which model it is. But it's basically an Oppo player, just rebranded with a couple little changes for the audio side of things that Cambridge Audio put in there. And reviews of the time when this came out, which I believe is early 2010s, somewhere around 2012, 2013, they said this player was even better than the Oppo because of the upgrades that Cambridge Audio did for the audio side of things. This is something that I don't have any plans of upgrading because the Oppo Blu-ray players, even to this day in 2025 and beyond, are still considered some of the best quality Blu-ray players you can get for physical media watching in a modern home theater. So given the fact that this is basically that player just rebadged and just kind of has one or two tweaks on the audio side of things, I have no interest in getting rid of it. It's the same thing like my projectors, as long as it stays physically capable of playing with no major issues to the actual unit itself, I have no issue in upgrading past this. So yeah, so here's another piece of the Endgame puzzle that I think I already have here for this early 2010s spec'd out Endgame home theater that I'm wanting to achieve here. Now in terms of speakers, most of my speakers are probably Endgame level for me. At least 3 of the 5 main channel speakers I have here are Endgame level for me. And you may have noticed something I just said there, 5 channels. This home theater setup, because I'm trying to spec out a 2010s era home theater, is not Dolby Atmos. I don't have any height channels, I don't have wides or anything like that. In fact, I don't even have a 7 channel. I don't have a second set of surround speakers. I'm using the tried and true home theater setup that was prevalent for majority of the last 20, 30 years in home theater, and that's just a standard 5 channel setup. It is perfectly immersive for my situation and honestly sounds better than when I used to have a 7.1 setup and when I used to have height channels kind of shoehorned in here. I feel like this 5 channel setup is perfectly fine and actually expands the audio out much better than cramming in all the other speakers I had here. So going along with that, the speakers in that setup, I have 3 of those 5 at Endgame level for me already. My center channel is actually a little bit older than the era I'm shooting for, but I still consider it an Endgame level speaker, and it has been a really good speaker for as long as I've had it here in my home theater, which is the last couple months here on the channel. And that is a Jamo THX LCR1 speaker. This speaker came out around 2000, maybe like 2001. So it's a little bit older, like I said, than the spec I'm going for. But at that point in time, Jamo was still considered a high-end boutique kind of speaker producer. They had not been bought out by Klipsch yet, so they weren't kind of put into the mass-produced, little bit more budget, home theater friendly line that they've kind of become nowadays. And that's definitely what I get with this speaker. It's an on-wall speaker. It's three-way, the mid-range and the kind of peak levels through the tweeter. Everything sounds good. And for me, this is my center channel in my setup, and I have no real urge to get rid of it either. This is really an Endgame level speaker for me. And since these don't come up very often, I don't know if I will be able to find two more of them to make my left and right channels, because right now my Angstrom audio speakers, my Sonata 100s, are my left and right channel. They're perfectly fine for what I'm using them for, but in an ideal world, I would want to pick up two more of the Jamo LCR speakers so I could have a matching stage across the front, and really for me, that would be Endgame. But at least for right now, my center channel is an Endgame spec for me for what I'm trying to do with that Jamo speaker. And also, speaking of speakers, let's talk about my rear channels. I've done content on this before as well. My JBL 8340 speakers I have back there. They are the actual cinema grade speakers, pro line speakers that were prevalent in the 90s and kind of early to mid 2000s, and maybe even into the 2010s in a lot of actual commercial theaters, if they were, you know, using JBL brand speakers. And so for me, these have been an Endgame item for my home theater for a long, long time. And those as well are not going to go anywhere unless they physically get damaged or something happens. I'm just gonna go out and buy another set of either the 8340s or an 8330 or something in that line to put in here. So out of my speaker setup, my 5 channels, 3 of the 5 are pretty much Endgame level. And while the Sonata 100s are perfectly fine, they're not bad speakers, but in a perfect world, if I could spec this out fully and I can find them for a good deal, I would get 2 more of the Jamo LCR ones to put there so I could have a matching stage across the front of my home theater. Now, a couple items that right now I'm on the fence about, but I'm going to mention them here as being potential Endgame level items for me, are my Laserdisc player and my power amplifier that I have here. Because I do have a Pioneer AC3 Laserdisc player. This is something I've wanted for a long time in my home theater. I picked that up earlier this year. That really is an Endgame level item for me. The only kind of difference I would maybe make to upgrade past what I have now is getting an AC3 Laserdisc player that also has DTS capability, so that I could listen to DTS kind of surround sound audio. But honestly, for me, there's only a couple DTS discs that I would want to watch, but there's a lot more AC3 that I want to watch. So I'm perfectly happy with what I have right now. So I'm kind of on the fence with it because I would upgrade to a DTS version if I could find one. But really, as it is right now, the Laserdisc player is Endgame for me. Also going along with that is my Kenwood power amplifier. I made a community post about this like a month ago when I picked it up. I haven't done an actual dedicated video. That'll probably come a little bit later on the channel. But I found an old school Kenwood 5-channel power amp that is old school THX certified. So even though the official specs on it, because I believe this came out again a little bit earlier than the kind of era I'm shooting for, I think this was like mid to late 90s when this came out, but it was old school THX certified. So it says 100 watts per channel with all channels driven, but reviews at the time said it put out way more than that they just kind of conservatively said 100 watts a channel, but really it may be pushing closer to like 150 or 200 back then, you know, when they were reviewing it. And I can thank another YouTuber here on the channel, which is My Home Theater. He actually had one of these in a previous version of his home theater before he did some upgrades and things over the time that he had his channel. And he was kind of the guy who put me on to finding this amplifier. And so his video will be linked either up here or down maybe in the description or something if you want to check that out. I'll find the one where he talks about that. But yeah, so the power amp, the Laserdisc player, those are kind of Endgame level items for me, even though technically they're a little bit earlier than the spec that I'm kind of shooting for. And potentially I could upgrade those, you know, for the Laserdisc player if I find a DTS AC3 player, or if I was to find a power amp that, you know, could do more channels just to have the space, just in case I wanted to expand my surround sound, you know, out later on down the road, you know, if I could find a 7 or a 9 channel amp or something at a really good deal. But for right now, I think both of those items are still Endgame for me, with only 1 or 2 kind of minimal options to upgrade past that if I just found a good enough deal online. Now, before I end this video, I do want to mention a roadmap of a few things I would like to upgrade here at some point in the future to really get to this Endgame level home theater. And really it comes down to just a few specific items. For me, it comes down to my subwoofers, which I have some Polk. I believe they're PSW 10s or PSW 108s, I can't remember. They're effectively the same exact subwoofer, just different kind of serial numbers there, model numbers. But I have 4 of those, and I've talked about them before on this channel. They are definitely very, very budget friendly. They are not made for deep, dedicated home theater bass. So I would potentially like to upgrade those. I don't know if those kind of subs that I would find would fit into the era I'm looking for, you know, to spec out here, because I think some more modern subwoofers can be found more affordably to fit in there. So that might be a caveat, you know, against what I'm doing. But for me, subwoofers definitely need to be upgraded. The other thing that I would like to upgrade is I want to get a dedicated home theater processor, not the Emotiva that I had here, because I had one of those for a while. It had a bunch of issues with image processing and stuff that I couldn't defeat for standard desk sources. So I definitely don't want one of those. But I would like to get a more dedicated home theater processor. My current Onkyo receiver that I'm using here is fine for what it is. I would much rather have a dedicated kind of home theater processor to kind of pair with the Kenwood power amplifier. And I have a couple in mind. In fact, at the time of recording this video, this is right at the end of June, very beginning of July 2025, I have a couple items that I'm watching on eBay and Shop Goodwill and a few sites that will be ending in the next week. Maybe, if I'm lucky, I might be able to sneak one of those purchases, you know, off eBay or wherever for a steal of a price. But as it sits right now, I'm using my Onkyo receiver kind of in that spot as a processor. It's fine for what it is, but I would like to get something in that 2010 era kind of setup that has more HDMI inputs, more video and audio inputs, just to be able to expand out the different sources and things I have connected in there. But those are 2 big items, you know, that I would like to change. And then lastly, I have a couple items here that fit my Endgame level home theater, but they technically don't fall into the era I'm looking at because they're just too new for stuff like that. One is my projector screen. Really, for my setup I have now, my 128-inch screen really is Endgame for me. I can't really go any bigger because of logistics for my space. You would end up cutting into people's heads that are sitting watching, you know, the content. So you'd start to get shadows of people's heads on the screen. So the 128-inch screen is really the max that I can put here. So that is Endgame, even though the material obviously is not going to be from 2010 or something like that. It's all modern stuff. And the other thing is my 4K player. I have a Panasonic UB420. It's pretty good for what it does. And honestly, it's probably the best bang for your buck in terms of a 4K player that also does tone mapping and image scaling to kind of scale it down to 1080p for my home theater setup. But if I had it my way, again, if I could like get the true Endgame version of that, it'd probably be nice to get like a UB9000. But honestly, I think that may be overkill for what I'm using it for. And I think the functionality of the UB420 is pretty similar. It's probably like 90-95% what you would get on the 9000. Just, you know, maybe a little less quality components and build quality and stuff like that. And obviously price tag. So maybe if I could find one of those, a UB9000 for dirt cheap somehow, I would pick it up to put it in here. But the UB420 works as well, but that doesn't fit the era because 4K wasn't really prevalent back then. And people may ask, because this does come up, I don't really have any interest in setting up media streaming, whether it's through a Kaleidoscape or a Zedu or setting up a Plex server or something like that. I have no interest in that. I am a physical media guy. I enjoy having the physical media disc, whether it's 4K, Blu-ray, DVD, or even Laserdisc or VHS tape even. I just enjoy having that physical media here to play. If you are someone who likes the streaming or whatever you want to call it for like Zedu and Kaleidoscape and stuff, that's perfectly fine. I have no issues with anyone who likes that. It's just not for me. I just don't enjoy that here in my home theater. Yes, it would be nice to have everything kind of just there on a server to be able to just like click through and just play it immediately and not have to get up and switch around discs and put stuff in there and go through all the menus and all the stuff that you get with it. But for me, I just like the physical media side of things. I'm a physical media guy, so I don't really have any plans of upgrading to a media server or streaming service like that here anytime soon in my home theater. Hopefully this was at least somewhat entertaining, somewhat interesting. I know not everyone has the same opinions I do, but I do enjoy putting it out there. I feel like it's a little bit different in the kind of YouTube home theater space, here on the platform. Definitely leave a comment down below. Let me know what your thoughts are on that 2010s era of gear, like I mentioned at the start of this video, and your thoughts on Endgame home theaters in general and what you would do in your home theater, if you have one, to get to Endgame level. I definitely enjoy hearing from everybody out there. Anyways, with that, thank you to everyone who's viewed my content, who's watched this video. I really do appreciate it. If you do enjoy what I'm doing here on the channel, definitely consider leaving a like, leaving a subscribe, hitting that bell notification icon, all that good stuff, all the things YouTubers like to push on everybody, because it really does support me and this channel. As I said in some previous videos, I'm getting closer and closer each day to hitting 3,000 subscribers. That is a goal of mine to kind of hit that by the end of the year, hopefully. So any additional subscribers out there would really help me get to that point. I really would appreciate it. And so with that, we're done with this video here today. Thanks again, and I will see you the next time in the next video right here on Secondhand Home Theater. Thank you.